I would like to open the forum by opening statements by each one of you. So we didn't flip a coin or anything. We could start with Mike and just work our way down, and then maybe I can mix it up later so that the order is a little varied throughout the afternoon. But let's start with opening statements. Former Mayor Mike McGinn. 2 minutes, and we have a timer. Yes, that's you. Help. We have a timer, so they're going to give you a 30-second warning, a 10-second warning, and then a sign that says time when your time is up. And so she will sit right there so y'all can look straight out and see her. That's Anne. Thank you, Anne, for being our timer. There you go. So are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah, I want to make sure you're ready.
I'm ready.
Great. Here we go, everybody. Opening statement, former Mayor Mike McGinn.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being the timekeeper and being on us, because we will definitely go over if given the opportunity. Mike McGinn, I live up in Greenwood. I have 3 kids. They've all attended Seattle Public Schools. And, I was mayor before, as you well know, and I was watching what was happening in our city and really having a lot of concern. And the depth of my concern was watching the way rents and housing prices were going up. And what that meant for this city, what this meant for the people of our city, the way in which, it was forcing people out. It was forcing people out who are here already, who may be of middle or lower incomes. It meant we wouldn't be the type of place that people could come to and make a life. I mean, I remember how I felt that first time coming across the I-90 bridge and seeing Seattle and really feeling like this was a place where, I could do something and be something and raise a family, which I've done. At the same time as we're looking at that side of the squeeze, I started calling it the Seattle squeeze. What we saw was that the answer to every problem for City Hall was another regressive tax. And so now we're squeezing people from the other side. We have a very regressive tax system. If you're lower income, you'll pay 15% in local taxes. I'm not talking about our state tax system. I'm talking about local taxes. If you're higher income, only 5%. And this is in a time of extraordinary growth in the city. We are flush with money. The general fund has grown $250 million over the last 3 years, 25%. So I want to take the experience I have as a mayor who had to cut budgets in the recession and use that same experience in understanding our budget and use it to reprioritize our dollars to what matters. And to the extent we need more money, I think it's time that we look to the people, and in particular, not the people, the big corporations that are doing so well in this city, the ones that are benefiting the most from the growth should help pay for the growth, not the people that are most impacted by that growth. So I've run out of time. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be more opportunities.
Hi there. It's good? Okay. It is great to be here in West Seattle. Through this campaign, I've spent a lot of time over here. I came for the garage sale day. I came on other days to meet people in the farmers market. You have the best farmers market in the city. And it's really good to be here and talk about the future of our city together with you. I'm Carrie Moon. I am running for mayor because I believe in Seattle's potential. We have an economy that's generating incredible wealth. We have a spirit of innovation and a shared commitment to progressive values that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. But we are becoming a city of haves and have-nots, of winners and people who feel like success is a party they weren't even invited to. I have 2 teenage kids and 2 stepkids in their 20s, and when I look at what we're leaving them, I am angry and ashamed. We need solutions to our housing affordability crisis, to our economy that's generating so much wealth, but not for us. I have solutions to all those issues, to housing affordability with concrete, substantive action plan in my platform, to economic development by focusing in on small and local community-based businesses where wealth is generated and gets recirculated back into the community so we all prosper, so our kids have access to good jobs in locally owned businesses. I believe that Seattle, in this time of prosperity, in this time of dysfunction in Olympia and utter disarray in Washington, D.C., should be the North Star vision. Seattle, with all of our blessings, should be the place that shows what a progressive city committed to the well-being of everyone can look like. affordable housing, an economy that builds wealth for everybody, not just the wealthy few, a commitment to sustainability, and solutions to the people facing homelessness. We can do it if we work together, and I'd love to be the mayor to lead that change that we need so desperately. Thanks.
Hi everybody, thanks for having me here. My name is Jason Roberts. I'm a lifetime resident of Seattle. I'm a small business owner and a consultant. I got into this race because, like many of you, I am not satisfied with the direction our city government has gone. Like it's been pointed out before, we have more money in this city than we ever have in the entire history of it. Yet our homeless population is larger than it's ever been and rising exponentially. The wage disparity is ridiculous, and we're being priced out of our homes. Big business has come in and done quite well here, brought great prosperity. But it's also created a rift with the general population that we have, just our average workers. Can't even afford to live anywhere near downtown Seattle where they work. So I got involved because I think that it's time that our city take accountability for the problem that they helped create. I think that we need to demand more from our city leaders, and I'm here to provide that. I think our city budget has risen, again, larger than it's ever been, yet we can't afford to solve some of these problems. So it's time that we learn to do more with less, focus on the actual problems and less on the infrastructure of maintaining these problems and get to the bottom of it and make sure that the money gets all the way through to the people that it's trying to help and not lost in focus groups and studies and consultants. So to that end, I hope to manage the budget much better than it's been done in the past and get to the root of our problems and solve them. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jessin Farrell. I am, until very recently, a state legislator from Northeast Seattle. I was born in Northeast Seattle and went to the University of Washington, where I was the saxophone section leader of the Husky Marching Band. And I've been an attorney and worked on transportation and land use issues as an activist and nonprofit director for my career. And in Olympia, I advocated for our working families. I passed tough legislation on oil companies and have worked on making sure that our education system is working for every kid. I'm running for mayor because there is a lot of pain in this city, and it is around affordability, around equity, around transportation. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I believe. Number one, I believe that housing is a human right, and that to address our homelessness problem, we have to address the housing issue as well as mental health issues. Number two, I believe that affordability should be infused throughout the city, and that every neighborhood should do its fair share, and yet growth isn't a cookie-cutter issue for every single neighborhood. Thirdly, we need transportation relief. We need to deliver light rail faster. We need better connections to downtown and between our neighborhoods. Fourth, we need to be a leader on climate. As the federal government has failed and as our state government hasn't made the big, bold solutions, we need to show the world what cities can do. We also need the city to be a partner with our public schools. As the mother of 3 young children, our schools need support, and our city government should be a partner in that. Finally, we also know that we need to continue the tough work of police reform. Every person in our city should feel safe. When someone calls for help, they shouldn't open the door with the fear that they're going to be shot, as what happened in Magnuson Park recently. So, as someone who has worked as an advocate and an activist, I know how to work with neighborhoods. As someone who's worked as a legislator, I know how to work with a legislative body like the City Council. As someone who has worked at the executive level in government, I know how to be a steward of our resources and how to work with a large workforce. So I would love your support, and I'm looking forward to talking more with you today.
My name is Jenny Durkin, and I'm also running for mayor. I'm running because I was born in this town. My mother was born and raised, I was born and raised, and I love Seattle. I've raised my 2 sons here, but we are at incredible crossroads in our country and in our city. And if we look at the national front with Donald Trump as president, it's not only clear that the answers won't come from Washington, but we have to make sure that Washington will not try to impose its wrong values here in the Pacific Northwest. I think we also have to look at the real challenges that are facing our city. You know, we are blessed with real economic prosperity at this time. I've lived in this city through various downturns and busts, but with that prosperity has come some real challenges. We have to address the homeless problem in Seattle. There are ways to do it, proven ways, and I think we can do it as a city. Affordability, as the other people have said here, is critical. You know, I would like in 20 years from now and 10 years from now for my sons to be able to live in this city. I'd like in 5 years for them to be able to live somewhere other than my couch. But if you look in parts of the city, people are getting shut out, they're getting pushed out, and we need to bring more affordable housing on immediately. We also have a unique opportunity now to help fixing some of our transportation challenges, and we have to make sure Sound Transit 3 comes on, not only on time, but if so, sooner and under budget. We have to fix the connectivity between West Seattle and downtown. Getting out of West Seattle, as you all know, or to West Seattle can be a nightmare sometimes. So I think that we are in a time right now where Seattle, the answers to the future, I believe, lie in the cities. It is going to be the urban areas who can fix the future. And I think Seattle is the best place to do that. Two of my very close friends, I was honored to serve as the U.S. Attorney under President Obama. Two of my very close friends were the U.S. Attorneys in Newark and Detroit. Those cities have very different challenges, ones that are almost insoluble. Ours aren't. We can be the leader for the nation. Thank you.
I'm Bob Hasagawa. I am currently a state senator in the 11th district, which neighbors you to the east. But I am very familiar with South End issues, and so much so that I've been endorsed by your state senator, Sharon Nelson. I come out of the social justice movement. I'm a lifetime social, racial, gender, labor justice, workers' rights organizer. And what I would bring to the mayor's office is the ability to manage transformational organizational change, because I believe that the mayor's office has become disconnected from the communities. People are feeling everywhere throughout the city that I talk with that decisions are being made that directly impact our communities without community input. So I would, in the same way that I manage transformational change in the Teamsters Union, do the same thing for public office here, city government in Seattle, by putting the neighborhood councils and re-empowering them and driving decision-making back down to grassroots levels so we actually have meaningful impact on the decisions that are being made, not just words being said that are not being heard by people in office. I also bring the only real fiscal solution that I can see to help the city government meet all of its financial obligations and challenges in the future, because I've been a strong supporter for public banking over the years, and I think that the city of Seattle is a perfect place to implement that as a solution so that we can afford to build significant levels of public housing, which will, we drastically need more housing built here. I would also think that we could use it to possibly refinance Sound Transit so that the West Seattle spur can be advanced, because waiting until 2042 is too long. So I'm asking for your support and hope that you believe that I can bring that institutional change to Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our opening statement portion. The next section of the forum is going to be a single question that I would like all of you to answer in your own inimitable way. And what I'd like to do is start with Jessen, move up this way, and then come circle back around that way. So here is the question. Many people in Seattle and Washington, all over the world, have been looking to our leaders to take bold actions through big progressive ideas to protect Seattleites and even those beyond the city limits. By example, I'm thinking of Bob Ferguson, who stood up to the administration in the White House on the... Yes, thank you, I agree. The City Council in their bold enacting of the $15 an hour law, Jay Inslee's public stance for the fact that we need to take action now on global warming and environmental issues. What is an example of a big, bold idea that you will fight to implement if elected mayor? Jessen, I'll start with you.
Thank you. This is a great question. And I'm going to bring up an issue that we haven't been hearing a lot about on the campaign trail in many forums. And that is something around childcare. We have an affordability crisis in our city that is related to housing, certainly, but it is also related to the cost of childcare. And it is very difficult for families in this city to find quality childcare and to find childcare that's affordable. And as mayor, I would love to promote the idea and policies to support the idea that no family should pay more than 10% of its annual income on childcare. And so how do we get there then? There are several things that we can do in the near term to make that a reality for families. First of all, as a legislator, I fought and brought home $500 million that's going to start coming to this region in 2020 to support our most vulnerable youth and low-income children. We should use that $500 million in part to support high-quality childcare options, culturally appropriate childcare options throughout the city. Secondly, we need to look at the next family and education levy and look at how we're going to support more childcare options, but also the people who are providing childcare. We know in this city that you cannot get by on $15 an hour. Even though we led on that, we need the people who are providing those services to be able to have the ability to live in the city and have secure and stable incomes. So that's the second piece. Finally, I would love to work with private employers. There are some ideas around creating vouchers so that as an employee benefit, you actually get a child care benefit. One of the things I would like to do is to work with the University of Washington as they're going through their master planning process to implement an idea like this. If we could do this, we would be leaders in the world in helping families have economic stability and great child care for their kids.
Those are all terrific ideas. I think one of the things that's great about this is you've got wonderful choices and ideas we're hearing. One thing I really want to look at as I'm out talking in neighborhoods and meeting with people is part of the affordability crisis we have is the wage disparities that we've heard about. And part of that is the good paying jobs just aren't there for people who are coming up to the ranks. The young people have no choice. So I'd like to pilot a program where we pull together, we have some of the most innovative employers, soup to nuts in this region, both, government and private. I'd like to put together and expand an apprenticeship program so that kids who are in schools today can be trained to trade very early on and identify it, get jobs in the summers, get experience, so that when they get out of high school, maybe college isn't the route for them. Maybe they go right into the trade or the experience. We are building some of the largest buildings that have really well-paying jobs in, iron workers, steel workers, insulators. And we're bringing people from outside this region to do them. We have firefighters, police that are retiring at a record rate and not enough to fill the trades. We have companies like Starbucks and Amazon. So I want to get these kids today hooked up with the jobs of the future. Because if we don't have the kids today hooked up with those jobs in the future, 10 years, 20 years from now, there's no way we can have the city we want. And I think if we lead on that, we will solve the problem we see around this country where as jobs are going away in this new economy, nothing is left but despair. And if you look at the last election, I think that despair is largely what led to some of those regions that voted for Donald Trump when they should have been Democratic votes. So I think we've really got to focus on what are our kids today, what are the opportunities, and we have to be very intentional to make sure those opportunities are available for every kid in every neighborhood, depending on, and not relying on their economic status. We have a real problem in social justice and equity issues, and we have to make sure that our kids of color know that America is meant for them and promise is meant for them. Thank you.
So certainly there's no shortage of individual issues that we could be focusing on, but I try to look at things from a more systemic level, because when we're looking at leverage points, the higher in the chain that we can impact, the greater the bow wave effect that we can have to do so many other things. So to me, those changes would be, we got to bring democracy back to our city. We have to get people more engaged because our democracy is being stolen from us. As long as money makes all the decisions in our political system, we're not going to be able to, we could do all kinds of little good things, but they're just paternalistic approaches to government. What we really need to do is empower the people so that we win these victories for ourselves for the long term, because in a paternalistic method, you might get a benevolent dictator at the top who's going to say, yeah, let's do this year. But down the road, with a change of administration, we can lose it just that easily. Look at what's happening with Donald Trump. So I would look for systemic change about re-engaging the people power progressives instead of paternalistic progressives. But that being said, my other fundamental thing that I would like to see implemented is the bank, publicly owned bank, because from that, so many other good things become possible. Right now, if we depend on taxing capacity or bonding authority to be able to build the infrastructure we need, we do not have that over the long term. It is a downward spiral where we keep indebting ourselves further and further to Wall Street. What we need to do is create our own capacity to self-finance, which we totally have within ourselves, within our city, to finance the type of construction necessary to build sufficient public housing, or to build the schools that we need to implement 1351, or to pave sidewalks so that we can have walkable communities. So that is the structural one big deal that I would like to see, policy-wise, is to create a publicly owned bank.
Boy, I've been really debating how to answer this question, because I've kind of been a big idea guy for a while. You know, I was as mayor, we were the first city in the country to say we would divest from fossil fuels, which helped spark the divestment movement. I promoted municipal broadband in my first race. Every candidate says they want to do it. We haven't seen it yet. I look at what we've done on paid sick leave, and then later on the $15 an hour minimum wage. We launched the first universal pre-K study. So when I said I was debating how to answer this question, we've had a lot of big ideas. I've just really been concerned about the follow-through on some of these. Even though we say we're going to be carbon neutral, we are not reducing our carbon emissions to the level needed. So symbolically wonderful, but we need to take a lot of actions about better transit, more walkability and bikeability, people being able to live in their neighborhoods and do what they need to do. We still haven't divested from fossil fuels from our pension fund. There's been foot dragging on that for 3 years. We are seeing greater inequity in our city. We have to figure out, in addition to paid sick leave and minimum wage, you know, the next steps on that are portable benefits of some type to deal with the gig economy, as well as family and medical leave expanded as well, so that we create a floor for all of our workers. As we deal with that, and I would love to dig back into municipal broadband and actually do it. What that would do is, I know it sounds expensive to do, but instead of paying Comcast or CenturyLink, you could pay a municipal broadband utility and pay it less money to pay off the cost of building it and get better service, and we could provide it to every house in the city if we did it that way, which would help close the digital divide. For too many low-income people in particular, this is the only computer they have, and they're not going to be connected to the economy. So I'm all for big ideas, but I'd like to complete some of the big ideas we've had in the past.
So what got me into this race is the affordable housing crisis. Looking at what our city has done, we all have stories of, daughters who are couch surfing, of people we know we work with who've been forced to move to Kent or Tukwila or farther to chase affordable rents, and then they're cut off from community, forced to drive all the time, and cut off from services. This is not the city we want to be. This is not the city we are in our hearts, and we need to solve this problem. So I've been working for decades on solutions to some of Seattle's biggest challenges, and as an engineer and an urban planner, I go deep. I understand the whole system. I figure out how to solve the problem at its root. And for me, the housing affordability crisis is not because people are moving here because they want to live here and take advantage of our great city. That's fine. The problem is Wall Street and corporate speculators buying our housing stock and using it just for profiteering, not because they want to live here, but because they see, oh look, Seattle's market's hot. It's the best investment out there. We have got to have the courage to block that activity. So my big idea is really working on the housing affordability crisis by putting in a tax on corporate, Wall Street, and non-resident ownership of our housing stock to block that activity, to taking that money we generate through that tax, plowing it back into affordable housing, looking at all the surplus city-owned land. The city has over 100 parcels of land that are close to transit, are accessible by electricity and water, that they could free up for development of affordable housing if they felt the political pressure to do so. I would like to lead that. And continue to push on the state to get housing trust fund money. We need to be building affordable housing at 10 times the rate we are now if we really want to get ahead of this crisis. And then finally, look at the missing middle. The up zones have been controversial, but there's a lot more work we could be doing to talk about how to grow with grace in neighborhoods, how to out townhouses, congregate housing, clustered housing. There's a lot of solutions that people like better than the 4-pack that we're getting everywhere that would allow us to bring density in the neighborhoods. So I'll stop. Thanks.
Some of the big ideas, I think, actually are conversations that Seattle needs to start engaging with Olympia. There's a lot of talk right now about a city income tax. I am not necessarily opposed to a city income tax, but I prefer that tax reform happens at the state level across the entire state, not just here in Seattle. I'm not for taxing wealthy households only. I think that tax should be appropriate, spread across, evenly divided, not a punitive thing. But as you know, income tax is currently forbidden in Seattle, so that is a conversation that needs to happen in Washington and Olympia. And I would be happy to lead that charge. Another one is rent control. Again, I am not 100% for rent control, but the way that our affordable housing is factored is they take the area median income and take 30% of that, and that's what your yearly housing budget would be. So our current area median income in Seattle is about $80,000. And that does not really represent the average worker's income. I think that number would probably be closer to 40 or 50, if that. And that certainly does not represent any of the people that work in the service industries and some of these low-income jobs. At $15 an hour, I think you're making like 36. So I would like to find a way to factor the area median income in a way that reflects the average worker, not the average sum of all income earned.
So that concludes our big ideas section of the forum. I'd like to move now to the round robin, as it were. I'm going to, I've got a little goodie bag here, my bag of roses, for questions that the candidates will choose at random, and each candidate will get to answer. They'll have 2 minutes to answer the question that they choose. So let's see, can we start with Bob? Okay, we'll start with Bob on this one. Yes, 2 minutes per candidate for this round as well. Here's your question, Bob Hasagawa. The issue of a city income tax is being talked about more and more as Seattle looks for more progressive ways to collect revenue, which we so badly need to pay for services like K-12 education, mass transit projects, clean energy, social services, and the list goes on. Do you support a city income tax? And if so, or if not, what specific steps will you take to have everyone pay their fair share so we can pay for all the things we so desperately need?
I'll just start off by saying I was just noticing your shoes, they're beautiful. I have been a long-time proponent of comprehensive progressive tax reform in the state legislature. I've actually sponsored bills to create a statewide income tax. I think that we need a comprehensive conversation about that, because to me, the B&O tax, for instance, is just as regressive on small businesses as a sales tax is on individuals, because the B&O requires a startup business to pay taxes whether or not they're making money, and that just is tubing their opportunities to grow. a public bank should also be part of this conversation, because it will actually generate revenue for the people without raising taxes. So take the Bank of North Dakota, for instance. Last year they just registered the 12th consecutive year of record profits for the people. And so that record profit means they were making record profit even during the Great Recession. So it has the ability to stabilize economic conditions and be counter-cyclical. As far as the income tax goes, the city proposal has some challenges, to say the least, because what they're trying to do is get a constitutional decision on whether the Supreme Court will say it's constitutional or not. But the reality is there's actually a statutory bar too. And so I don't think it's going to even get to the Supreme Court for a constitutional decision, because we have to change the statute. That's what's barring it in the immediate sense. So we have to regain a majority in the legislature to actually change the statutory law. And that is the real challenge that we are all facing. So as far as comprehensive progressive tax reform goes, though, I think that my record is very strong and clear over the years, and every year I campaign. Even though Tim Eyman keeps passing the initiatives and the 11th district supports them, I still win supporting progressive tax reform.
So, a question for Jenny Durkin. When Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Accord, many mayors in cities all over the U.S. vowed to stay in locally and take local action to remain in accordance with the provisions of the agreement. If elected, will you vow to stand with the many other U.S. mayors to fight global warming, and what specifically will you do to take meaningful action in support of the environment?
Damn straight. Sorry. Absolutely. I mean, I think that our battle against President Trump is on climate change and other issues is going to be fundamental to who we are as a city. And I'm going to get to climate change in just a minute, but we already heard about immigration, the clap for Bob Ferguson. You know, the day that the immigration travel ban came down, the Muslim ban, I drove to SeaTac Airport because I'd been representing the Port of Seattle, some issues. And on the way there, I called some friends of mine who sued me when I was U.S. Attorney, the ACLU, Northwest Immigrants' Right Project, and said, we will need lawyers for these people. It took us hours to figure out who was where because we could not get the information about who they were detaining. And we finally found out they had put 2 men on a jet to Dubai, and it was leaving in 45 minutes. We were able to get one of the first emergency federal court orders to stop that. They had to bring the jet back, and those men were not illegally deported. That's the kind of leadership we provide in this region, and on climate change, it's going to be absolutely critical. We have already been a leader. We fortunately have an electric grid that is mostly green, but as we are moving forward in how we make ourselves more green as a city to achieve climate change, we also have to look at the social equity issues. For example, it would be very good for us to move to more electric vehicles instead of carbon-based vehicles. But there's many parts of the city where people will not have the means to charge cars, let alone a garage. So as we move in that way, we also have to have equity in mind and make sure that we provide that for other parts of the city, so that as we improve as a city, we don't increase that racial gap. The same with housing efficiency. There's been lots of programs. They're terrific to make houses more efficient so we save energy, but it hits the lower income people the hardest. So we will continue to lead on our climate goals. We're going to green up our electrical grid. We're going to be pushing to be to divest and to make sure that this whole country, you know, we now have a president that actually admits that our foreign policy is based on oil. We're going to change that.
All right, here's a question for Justin Farrell. Our educational system is continuing to remain in limbo with no actionable plans to fully fund K through 12. How will you work with the City Council to find ways to secure funding and services for Seattle Public Schools?
Thank you for that question. I have been on the front lines in Olympia for the last 5 years, and it has been a very frustrating 5 years because we have divided government and Republicans fundamentally don't believe in our public schools. So we're having a debate about the basic premise of fully funding McCleary. So there will be some solution this year, but it will be shy of the mark for Seattle Public Schools. We face deep inequities in our system. Those are not going to be solved at the state level. We face a growing special education population. Those issues aren't going to be solved even with the McCleary decision. And so our City Hall has to be a partner to meet the needs of every single kid in this city. So what does that look like? Number one, the city needs to partner with public schools to help close the opportunity gap. Kids of color in our city do not have the same educational experience as white kids do. So we need to figure out how to remedy that. One thing we can do is to help deal with what happens in the summer. Kids with resources have lots of enrichment opportunities. Kids without those don't get the same thing. We need to help fund summer school. Kids have to pay for summer school these days. We need to make sure that there are enrichment opportunities in our parks and recreation programs, and we need to make sure that there are job opportunities. We have this amazing economy. We need to be connecting kids to the private sector opportunities that are out there. Secondly, we need to make sure that where communities are able to provide resources around things like nurses or appropriate library books in the library, that's a place where the city can step in. Again, McCleary's not going to put a nurse or a mental health practitioner in every single school. That's just not even on the table in Olympia. But those things have major impacts on our kids' ability to learn. That's something that the city needs to do. And finally, housing matters. There are so many homeless families in this city, and we need to make sure that they are able to stay near their schools in stable, affordable housing, because that is what truly helps kids be able to get ready to learn every day.
Jason Roberts. Our city council personified big and bold when they voted to enact the $15 an hour law in Seattle. How will you work with the city council to ensure that Seattle is continuing to support livable wages? And do you think this law can be improved upon? And how so, if you do, and what would you propose?
Well, as a small business owner and have been a consultant and advocate for small businesses my entire career, many of our employees have been at that minimum wage, and I support it. Sadly, $15 is not a minimum. It's not a livable wage. It just isn't in the city. Small business can only go so far, though. Many restaurants are cutting back on their staffs, are closing entirely because of the competition that they have to face for skilled workers, for cooks, for example. I think that to move forward on this, we really need to think about the wage disparity that we have in this city. Ms. Durkin here had pointed out it before about training programs. I think that we have a big opportunity here with our tech industry and groups like Amazon and Microsoft to really get involved and start retraining our existing workforce as opposed to importing the workers that they need. In addition to that, I think that we can improve on our minimum wage by providing a better health care option for our low-income earners, and also doing smaller favors for them in the sense of, say, transit. Many of these low-income workers have been forced out of the city because they can no longer live in areas like the Central District and Capitol Hill. Maybe give them transit options as far as reduced bus passes and things of that nature. I'm all for anything we can do to help subsidize our workforce.
All right, this is... For Carrie Moon. Part of Seattle's burgeoning homelessness problem is due to a lack of affordable housing, which some of you have talked about already. If elected mayor, what specific steps will you take to work with city council, developers, landlords, and others to create more options for Seattleites and ease this shocking and unbearable problem?
So I talked a lot about solutions to housing affordability. How do we make sure we're building enough housing that is available to and affordable to working families, people working at minimum wage service jobs, and young people just getting started in life. So I can go deeper in that, but I also want to talk first about the homelessness crisis, because we haven't done a very good job talking about homelessness in our city. We know it's a crisis. We all see it every day. We all know folks who are one paycheck away from eviction, or folks who have been pushed into homelessness and have nowhere to go. And what we need is a much broader strategy around homelessness. We need to understand the root causes. This is something we've been kind of pushing under the rug, but a lot of it is the housing affordability crisis. It's also, we have disinvested in services, in mental health services and behavioral health services. So folks come out of the prison system, nowhere to go, no transitional housing. Folks grow up in the foster care system, get kicked out, nowhere to go, no transitional housing. So we're creating the problem of homelessness through disinvesting in all the social services that our economy used to provide folks. So the number one issue besides going after affordable housing solutions I already talked about, is to talk about how do we get services refunded so that we are helping people prevent homelessness, helping people get a fresh start in life, coming out of whatever institutional care they were in before. Give them a healthy, constructive place to get started again. We need to invest in that. And then we need to invest in a lot more kinds of low barrier shelters. Folks who've been pushed into homelessness, often 90% of them say, I would come inside if you offered me something that was livable for me. And that means a place where they don't have to get over their drug addiction or alcohol addiction first. So a place where they can go with their addiction and get treatment there. A place where they can stay with a partner, a place where they can bring a pet, a place where they get privacy. So low barrier shelters are a really important part of the solution, as well as affordable housing solutions.
This is for Mike McGinn. Incidents of Islamophobia have spiked considerably since Trump was elected. If elected mayor, how will you lead in the public positions you take or laws you might pass to stand against Islamophobia and other forms of hate crimes?
Thank you. And this has been a very serious issue. I've been I was fortunate enough as mayor to meet with so many different people across the community, and I've been reconnecting them with, of course, during this run, and in between as well. And it's hard to describe the level of fear and anxiety our Muslim neighbors are feeling, or just anyone who's an immigrant or comes from a community of color, because what's happening at the federal level is really emboldening behavior of people who before held it in check. And the reason they held it in check was because we had established, social norms about what was appropriate. And it's not just random individuals. It's not, the horrifying murder in Portland, but it's also just random stuff on the street as well. And then you get a situation, because the laws have also changed. Not the laws, the regulations. Before, ICE would only go after the most serious violations. Now, anything can get you in trouble with ICE if they decide to do that. So the bureaucrats are emboldened, or other people who might turn you in. And so now we have people who are nervous about contacting the police if there's an incident. I heard about such an incident, some South Asian folks over on the east side, they were being harassed and yelled at outside their house. They didn't even call the police because they didn't know what would happen next. So, first thing a mayor can do, obviously, is help establish norms. And that means being present, speaking up at every opportunity about what it means to be a Seattleite, what it means to be a Northwesterner, and who are that Muslim and everybody. They are our neighbors, and we will not stand for this. Second, setting the tone throughout city government that we have to be a trusted ally when anyone approaches us. Third, we have to look at every legal avenue at our disposal to fight these rules and laws that are going to break up families. I just think this is a place where a mayor is seen across the region as a leader, we have to demonstrate leadership and rally other mayors, other community leaders to stand up to Trump and what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, I want to take, I'd like to go to round 2, and let's see. Yeah, he's.
First or last, but this one.
Well, I just want to let people be seen in a kind of a varied way by you and by them. So we could, let's start with Jason. We'll go that way and circle back around through Bob. I should have been an architect. Okay, so round 2. These are more just questions chosen at random on different issues that are important to Seattle. This is for Jason Roberts. Mayor Murray publicly stood against the White House administration when Trump gave more power, you were just talking about this, to ICE officials to detain and illegally deport people of color and immigrants. Mayor Murray vowed to keep Seattle a sanctuary city, or what is now being referred to as a freedom city, despite the threat of funds being taken away by Washington, D.C. What will you do, if elected mayor, to ensure that people of color are not profiled or targeted by ICE? Specifically, what would you do?
Well, first of all, it would remain a sanctuary city. I think Seattle is a bastion of progressiveness in this country, and we should set the example for the rest of us. I would not change anything as far as what we're doing now, other than to make people more aware that our law enforcement is not going to turn them in, that it is safe to call the police when you have issues. I don't think that if a friend of mine had an accident the other day and ran into someone of Hispanic descent, and they emphatically did not want to call the police. So we can't have issues like that happening where people are afraid to, as McGinn said, to even report harassment. I think that our population as a general supports this, but I think there's more that we can do to reinstall that, even in the younger generations. I think in schools, you know, often when I was growing up, religion just was not necessarily mentioned at all, other than, you know, Pledge Allegiance and that. But I think that we need to start teaching cultural and religious differences in our schools, at least the basics of what various religions mean, what their beliefs are, what their cultures are, where they come from. So we have a better understanding of who all of us are and the diversity that we bring to our city, and have respect for that, and teach that at an early age. I think that's a great opportunity that we can start with now.
This is for Carrie Moon. Drug addiction and mental health and behavioral health struggles are growing problems in our city, and coupled with the lack of funding for social services, again, some of you have spoken to this, it is clear that we can't ignore this anymore. What actionable steps will you take, if elected mayor, to create services to help those in need, rather than simply approaching the situation with law and order philosophies?
So this is one of the tragedies of our time. The #1 cause of death now for people 50 and younger is overdose. And that is a death of despair. That is what happens when you tell a whole generation, you don't matter, you don't belong here, we don't care about you, you have no place to go. People turn to drugs, and with lack of services, with lack of, you know, the safety net that we've relied on for so long in this country, we have basically abandoned these folks, and it's not right, it's not who we are. So it's not easy. A lot of the problems were caused at the federal level, disinvesting, at the state level, disinvesting, at the shortfalls in the county, which forced them to cut back. So these are problems that are bigger than Seattle, but within the city of Seattle, there's a few things we can do. We can look at all the services we do have and really get everyone to the table, look at efficiencies, look at duplication of efforts, look at where we could tighten up and create more funding available for programs, less for bureaucracy. So that's one thing to look at. And second, I think the citywide, the budget, as Mike has said, the general fund has increased $250 million a year in the past 4 years. We've hired 1,200 city employees. We've got to look more tightly at the city budget itself and look at any cost savings we can find there, because we have these crises, housing affordability, social services, that absolutely need more funding. Third, another one of the problems in social services is that the folks who are doing the hardest work, who are going out to meet with homeless people, who are dealing with people with the worst problems in our society, are not paid well enough. And they get burned out. It is a job that's nearly impossible to do. They need a lot of rest, a lot of recovery, a lot of training, a lot of breaks, and a lot of support. And we are not taking care of those employees well enough. So we need to find the funding to do that and expand the population of service providers and make sure we are taking care of these folks so they don't feel abandoned.
Again, it's excited. Jobs are so important as our city grows, and supporting labor is as important as supporting developers. What will you do if elected mayor to create a friendly environment for workers and labor unions in Seattle?
By the way, I want to say I love the grab bag. You know, every one of us has just got to be quick on our feet after when this one comes up. I had been a supporter of unions. In fact, I got a little bit of heat over here in West Seattle because I didn't support a street vacation for a new development because it was going to support a non-union developer. And I have to say, when I became mayor, before I became mayor, I probably would have supported that new development based on my views. But after spending time meeting with service workers and grocery store workers and really understanding the threats they were under, and again, with rising prices, with how far away they have to live, the idea that there'd be a non-union store nearby that might put their union store out of business, that was a high priority for them. So I made a tough and controversial decision on behalf of workers. I think that whenever we're using city resources, when we're spending city dollars or selling city land or setting city policy, we need to look about how we're going to make sure that those dollars are going to be supporting good wages and benefits for the people that are participating in that. So whether that's building a new arena, we want to make sure we have union jobs in it. When we fund child care or universal pre-K, which we do, we should be professionalizing and raising the wages and benefits of the people who do that work, who are very often women and very low paid relative to other job categories. That's part of the gender pay gap, is the fact that certain occupations are undervalued versus others. And we have a role, since we fund those, to help change that. So I think that those are some of the ways a city can support it, as well as just standing up for workers, as I've tried to do, with regard to hotel workers trying to get a better contract, or janitors or security workers getting a better contract. A mayor can play a role in helping the public understand that we're all in this together, and the people who take care of this city need to be paid properly. Thank you.
Bob Hasegawa. There are too many cars on the road in Seattle, and traffic not only causes frustration to drivers, but also costs millions of dollars to businesses in lost productivity. How will you address the problem of inefficient answers in how to move the growing numbers of people around our city, and how can you implement more mass transit options?
Thank you. So first off, freight mobility suffers a lot when traffic gets gummed up, and that's the heartbeat or the blood of our economy. So we got to make sure that freight is able to move as well as people. So transit has been a boondoggle for so long. I mean, we've got so many different agencies coming into our area. None of them seem to be really well coordinated. And I look at some of the potential solutions, like they were talking about Whidbey Island, for instance. They offer free public transportation on the island. And there's been studies done that said that over the next 20 years, it would cost us about $4.5 billion to provide free transportation throughout our area. That would increase ridership a bunch at a much cheaper rate than Sound Transit. It would, by an order of magnitude, I think, increase ridership over the capacity that our current Sound Transit does currently provide. But that being said, I think that Sound Transit could be good arteries into and out of central business areas, but people have a hard time getting to the stations. It's not really useful for a lot, especially if you're elderly and have mobility issues, just to even get to the transit station. So we need to think about more of a hub and spoke system for providing transportations from our neighborhoods to the hubs, so that we can then get on the hub to other areas that we might want to go to. Secondly, the current Sound Transit doesn't really go where people really want to go, which is like South Center. Why didn't they build a thing at South Center? I mean, it's kind of behind the curve right now. But some of these decisions are being made here again without the people's input. So I think that part of the transformational change in government is to actually listen to the people. What do we need and want that will serve us?
This is for Jenny Durkin. Homelessness is a problem that has reached crisis levels in our city. How do you see this problem being solved, and what actions would you take, specific actions, to mitigate a situation that shows no signs of getting better as of now?
What a great question, and I get this question, I think we all do everywhere we go, because it is such an enormous problem in the city. I think the first thing we have to understand is we have to make sure that we continue to deal at a place of respect and compassion for the people who are living on the street. And we always have to remember that these humans are in crisis and try to fix the crisis that they're in. The second thing we have to do, I think, is understand that people end up on the street for different reasons. While the manifestation is the same, that they lack a home, why they ended up there sometimes can be different. And so we have to address the problems that brought them to the street. One of the first things I would do as mayor is we have one of the highest populations of mothers with children living in cars. And after the last count, people generally living in cars. The reasons those people end up in their vehicles is very different sometimes than the reasons that you see people living in the tents or encampments. As your mayor, I will drive resources to the mothers and children, because I think those children are not just our future. If we don't take care of them now, we will be taking care of them later. And every time a kid has to change schools, data shows clearly that they're set back 3 months, 6 months. Well, homeless kids, if they even have a school, are changing from place to place, and their support systems are bad. So first, focus on the reasons. Sometimes it's domestic violence, sometimes it's economics, they've lost the job of the mother, and sometimes it's affordability. Move them first to temporary care with low barriers, and then to get a home. The homeless need a home. For the other populations, we have to address mental health issues and addiction issues. If we don't address that and treat the people that have those problems, whether we give them a home, we won't solve the problem. So we need to, right now, the county controls the dollars that go to mental health and addiction, and the city controls shelter. We got to work together and have regional solutions for this. It's not just a city problem, it is a regional and national problem.
This is for Jess and Farrell. Last weekend, our city was shocked and saddened by another police shooting with the death of Charlena Lyles. Although we don't know all the particulars, we do know that the officers were not adequately prepared for a situation that got fatally out of hand, and now a mother of 4 is dead. If elected mayor, how would you work with the Seattle Police to make sure the relationship between the police and citizens are based on trust, service, protection, and reliability, so that these unnecessary deaths can be non-existent or extremely rare.
So I think the most tangible thing that we're all feeling is that enough is enough, right? That no one in our community should fear opening the door when the police come. And the fact that Charlena Lyles was shot dead in front of her children is truly a tragedy, and something that I think we all need to be engaging in soul searching on, because there are deep systems around institutional racial bias that we all participate in, particularly the white members of our community. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But with respect to the police force and what needs to happen next, this really shines a tragic spotlight on the fact that the work and the progress that's been made around de-escalation is simply not enough. And as mayor, to really truly transform the police culture, I think that there are several steps that need to be taken. Number one, where there are issues around mental health and mental health crises happening, we need to make sure that mental health practitioners are engaged, that there is someone who is there at the scene who is able to work with the person and to help de-escalate as well. Secondly, we need to make sure that our police have the right training, and we don't know enough yet around the protocols and around the trainings, so I don't want to comment on that specifically. But we do know that more is needed around that, and more is needed in terms of de-escalation techniques. Thirdly, we need to make sure that the way we're recruiting and retaining officers, that we are doing more to recruit and retain people who are from those communities that are most impacted, communities of color, immigrant communities. And finally, we need to support state laws that change the fact that to prosecute a police officer, you need to prove intent of malice. That's a really, really high bar. And then finally, I think to all of us who are white in this audience, we're going to have to step in and come to the table in a different way than we have if we truly want to transform our culture and make this a place where every single one of us feels cherished and safe.
Okay, that concludes the round robin section of the event. What I'd like to do now is, due to our restricted time, there are a couple of just surprise questions from the audience that I would like to, and I'm not sure how we can do this, if we want to just maybe do a 1-minute response for each one, that each of the candidates can have a chance to respond to this. So I've got 2 questions that I'm going to take just because of our lack of time, and I apologize to others who may have questions. Steve Richmond, who did request a question.
Thank you. We're sitting in the West Seattle Golf Course through which Longfellow Creek flows. Seattle Public Utilities invested millions to restore the riparian habitat and for stormwater mitigation. And unfortunately, in this golf course, on the creek, there's an ornamental waterfall, a dam that prevents salmon from using that habitat. And I think it was Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife actually had a hatchery at one point, and salmon did return. So salmon are a cultural staple of the Duwamish tribe. And they remain without land or fishing rights that was guaranteed by the Point Elliott Treaty. As a potential leader of Seattle citizens, would you acknowledge a debt to the Duwamish tribe? In short, that's basically it.
Let's start here, we'll just go straight down the line.
Oh, the debt is deep. I mean, look what we've done to the entire Duwamish River, which used to be a source of food for the people here. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to clean it up right now, and we won't even get it completely clean because of the things that are washing down from upstream. We can clean what's there, but more pollutants keep coming. So yeah, the debt we owe, actually the debt we owe to our future generations, I think of my own kids, is huge. So absolutely. And the other thing I would say is, one of the things I did as mayor was I did over 100 town halls. I would just show up and take questions, and I'd bring departmental people with me. So to hold us accountable, because you don't necessarily hear stuff if you get if you're just stuck in your office dealing with the lobbyists, right? You don't get all the tough questions until you go out in the community. And then I'd have the advantage of having my department heads with me, and I'd say to them, hey, I would like a report on that ornamental dam in West Seattle Golf Course. Why haven't we changed it yet? Or should we change it? Or what are the pros and cons? And then I'd get back to you. So that's how I'd handle that if I were mayor.
Absolutely, yes. One of the things I've learned through working with young people and social justice people is they often start every meeting with an acknowledgement of the gratitude to the Duwamish and statement that we are on occupied land. And that is a great cultural practice to remind us all that we are guests here and we all owe each other and future generations and the earth a moral responsibility to take care of our environment, to make sure ecology works, to make sure that we continue to have this diverse, rich ecosystem we have that gives us the clean air and the clean water and the beautiful, healthy lifestyle that we love. One other thing I'd like to talk about is that this culture of sharing power across race, class, gender, and ethnic identity is an essential change we need to make in Seattle. And talking with Native Americans about including them in the way we plan the future city, as well as all other people of color, is essential to plan the future that we want, where we all feel like we belong, where we all feel like we're committed to the well-being of everyone and future generations. So I promise in my administration as mayor to make sure all decision-making bodies have a much better balance across race, class, gender, and ethnic identity.
Absolutely. The debt that we owe is great, and I don't even know if it can truly be repaired. The damage is severe that we've done already. I mean, a recent study has shown that fish that have been caught in this region have had all number of drugs and toxins in their systems, including Viagra and opioids, of all things, in our fish. I think that we really need to straighten up our environmental protocols and start trying to rebuild these salmon runs. I'm a fisherman myself, and this year's a pink salmon run. Last time the pink salmon came through and it went down to Duwamish, I saw maybe 2 or 3. I don't know if any of you all are fishermen, but when the pink salmon run, they run in very thick numbers, and they're known for their quantity. And when you're seeing 2 or 3 coming out of a river that should be filled with them, that's a big red flag. And we need to do whatever we can to repair the environmental damage that we've done to the Duwamish.
So I also agree that we have a deep debt that we need to repay, and that our city budget needs to reflect that value that I think we hold in this room. You may know that the state is on the hook for over $1 billion in having to fix fish culverts across the state because culverts have abridged tribal treaty rights and the ability to fish. And I've been a part of transportation budget negotiations where we have prioritized fixing culverts, and at the city level, we need to do that same thing because we are abridging tribal treaty rights right now by not doing that. Secondly, though, and I think this was a really good point, we've also contaminated waters and introduced major environmental justice and public health issues around people who rely on fish as primary sources of food, including the Duwamish, members of the Duwamish tribe, and others. And so it is incumbent upon us to work with industries to hold Boeing accountable, for example, which is responsible for some of the cleanup there, to make sure that the food people are fishing for is clean and safe for consumption.
Thank you. That's a great question, and the answer is absolutely. One of the things that was most enjoyable for me as U.S. Attorney was working with all the tribal leaders in Western Washington because of the relationship. And a lot of those tribal leaders are now supporting my campaign, including Brian Clattisby, because I work closely with them to protect the things they cherish, their environment. And when you talk about fish, I knew the person who was responsible for all the projects taking down the dams, and I said, you know, if you could sum it up in a word, why are you doing this? And they said, the fish need a river. And I think that's absolutely right. We have much we can learn from our tribal friends. In the criminal justice system, I helped develop a program with the Tulalip and went up there to learn what they do. They pair every person that comes, the young person that comes through the criminal justice system, rather than get them a conviction, they have a diversion program where they have to meet with tribal elders and understand the impacts of their acts on the community. And we incorporated that in the drug court that I established, so people would get reinvigorated but also retied to the community. So I think we not only owe them a debt, we can continue to learn. Thank you.
So yes, in the state legislature, I've been one of the outspoken advocates for tribal treaty rights, and work closely with Senator McCoy, who is a nationally recognized expert and leader on tribal rights. My question, and I was talking with Steve earlier about this, I don't understand why it's so difficult to remove the ornamental waterfall. I mean, it should, that just seems like that should be a no-brainer. Let's just do it. So we should probably talk more about that, but I don't see why there's a bureaucratic obstacle to removing the ornamental waterfall. Representing the other side of the Duwamish up until you get to the 14th South Bridge, or the first South Bridge actually, and heading south from there, I represent that whole South Park area. That is one of the most polluted. There are 7 Superfund sites on the Duwamish River, and the federal government absolutely has not been living up to its obligation for cleanup. That being said, we also have to look at some of the polluters to make sure that they're held accountable. Thank you.
This is going to be a moment where I turn to all of you and to the candidates. We are coming up on 1:20, which is time traditionally for our meeting to end. However, we do have another very interested question asker, and I would like to put it to you if you have a few more minutes to stay to answer another question, or if not, we can just adjourn. One more? Okay, Elizabeth, I would like to... 1 minute, yeah. So here's Elizabeth Heath with a question for you.
I believe that small businesses in Seattle are at risk, and it's the small businesses that create the flavor of our neighborhoods. We're becoming more homogeneous from neighborhood to neighborhood. So my question is, what would you do as mayor to support and sustain and increase the number of small businesses in Seattle?
Thank you so much for allowing me to go first. I do need to head out to get to something else. So I agree, there is something so special about our neighborhoods in this city, and one of the things is our unique and very rich small business culture. And as we have done things around increasing our labor standards, $15 an hour paid sick leave, environmental standards, those have absolutely been the right thing to do, but we've increased costs, and so we need to work with our small business community to figure out how to decrease costs. There are a number of ways we can do that. Number one, we can expand B&O tax exemptions for our small businesses, and we should do that. Number two, as we're looking at redeveloping our communities through HALA, through MHA, we need to make sure that we have small business supports embedded. Are we doing things to help support rental costs? Are we doing things around property taxes and allowing for abatements for renting to small businesses, local small businesses? So there are things that we have to do both on the small business cost side, particularly around rental costs, but also around taxes, and then resources, technical resources, to help startups and help people continue to be small business owners. And with that, thank you so much for having me today, and I'll see you all later.
Since Jessen has to leave, could I just interrupt a second here to have everybody just give a great big warm round of applause to all the candidates, to thank them for coming. Thank you so much for your time. It just has been a rich experience this afternoon. So I'm going to move on, and we'll have Jenny Durkin take the mic.
Thank you very much, and I apologize, I have to leave after this too. Small businesses really are part of the fabric of our neighborhoods, and when we talk about the city we want in the future, one that has transit centers and walkability, we all want to be able to walk to that small favorite restaurant, or that little shop that has the cards or the candles or the bookstore. I've been spending the last weeks trying every week to do a walking tour of the small business districts and all of the different parts of the city, and talking to business owners about what are the challenges they face. We have to try to preserve those businesses because they are not just the economic background providing more jobs and economy, but they're part of the richness. So I agree. I think one of the things we have to look for is the ability for the mayor to give property tax exemptions for certain classes of business and for affordable housing, so that if there are landlords who will either rent to small businesses or private housing, we can freeze or lower their property taxes. We have to reduce those costs, because every small business I talk to, as we move to minimum wage and those things, as the costs go up, that's what's crushing them. So as mayor, I'm going to look for every opportunity we have to lower that cost and protect our small businesses. Thank you very much. Here, I went counter. My fault.
Just kidding.
Faked you out.
And I apologize for leaving. Thank you very much.
So yes, our taxation policy is just as regressive on small businesses, as I mentioned earlier, as they are on individuals. But I think that housing some people talk about commercial rent control. I think there's a way to do that through our public housing policy. If we drastically increase the amount of public housing, it could be mixed-use housing, so that we're preserving some of the ground-level street fronts for commercial enterprises in those facilities. When I talk about public housing, a lot of people immediately jump to this image of the projects or whatever. It doesn't have to be. It could be mixed income use, mixed policy use for individual housing and commercial use, in which case we control the rent that we would charge and keep it affordable for small businesses. Plus, we should be providing technical assistance supports for small businesses so that they actually can meet a lot of the technical requirements and understand what it takes to grow their business, and provide low interest lending opportunities to provide cash flow for them as well.
As a consultant for small businesses and having worked for small businesses my whole life, I'm very familiar with this issue. Yes, the tax reductions would be great. Subsidizing these things would be an immense improvement. But we also have to invest in our communities. I'm a big neighborhood guy, and I think that our small businesses are the culture of our city, and it gives us our identity, and we're losing it on a daily basis. I see dozens and dozens of restaurants and cafes closing, and they're closing because of costs. It's been said by many of the candidates before, but we need to address it. In addition to that, people trying to start new businesses have immense hurdles to overcome. The permitting, licensing requirements, and the inspection process could keep a business paying rent in a facility for 3-4 months before they're fully operated, and they're paying rent this whole time without being open. So we need to streamline that process. We need a small business department with advocates in place to guide these people through the process and encourage them to invest in their own communities, hire from their communities, and spread that money in their communities.
So this issue is my other passion besides housing affordability. If we want to create an economy that works for everybody, we need to recognize that small business is the backbone of an economy that builds wealth and keeps wealth in community. And for the past 8 years or even longer, our city has completely neglected our small business base. We are attracting the Amazons of the world and the Googles and the Microsofts, and we are not paying attention to local, small, homegrown businesses where 75% of the jobs are created, where 50% of us work. So we need an economic development strategy that is focused on small, local, community-based businesses. We need an industrial, 21st century green industrial development strategy so we create the family wage jobs that provide lasting wealth in the community. And we need technical assistance. We've added new labor laws every year for the past 5 years, and it is hard to navigate, especially for people who are not English language speakers. So we need a lot more technical assistance and guidance for entrepreneurs who want to hold on to or start new businesses. Thanks.
So before running for mayor, I was president of the Greenwood Community Council for years, and we partnered with the small businesses there and the chamber and the residents on how do you do, what do you need in your neighborhood to make it work? And I think that's got to be a starting point. We actually have to hear from the neighborhoods themselves what's important to them. And as mayor, we launched a program only in Seattle that gave granting funds to neighborhood business district-driven initiatives. The tax reform issue, we should increase the exemption for small businesses, make up the money by charging the big businesses more. I think we need to do an inventory of what are the assets in neighborhoods that we want to preserve, whether that's historic preservation as well as neighborhood businesses, and then look at what are the strategies we can do to keep those in the face of development. Because you have to know what you have first. And the final thing is, look what we do at Pike Place Market, where we have a small market, which we own, it's a PDA. What if we did that in multiple neighborhoods that created stalls and entrepreneurial opportunities for small businesses? Kind of like mobile food trucks were an entry point for entrepreneurs that they could then grow into something bigger. So I think that's another strategy we should employ, and my time is up. Thank you.
All right, everyone. I had room for more, but we really, I think we got a lot done. We heard some really good points from all the candidates. I think we're going to have some tough choices to make, everybody. So I want to thank you all again for coming, and thank you to those who found us through Facebook or social media or the West Seattle blog. Thank you, West Seattle blog, for being here today and covering this event. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Victoria Shaw, who is one of our new members, who is also a former photojournalist. So she was filming and taking video as well. We really appreciate getting the word out about these wonderful candidates so that you all can be educated and informed to make a really very thoughtful decision when you vote this August. So thanks again for coming, and we will see you next month.